After my family was murdered and the killers came for me, I became someone else entirely, someone they'd never recognize. I infiltrated Seoul's deadliest mafia, earned my way to becoming his most trusted bodyguard. Until the night he discovered my secret while I was fighting to save his life. Lydia Eze stood in the bathroom of her tiny Seoul apartment, scissors trembling in her right hand. The mirror showed a woman she barely recognized anymore, eyes hollowed from 3 months of running, shoulders tight with the kind of fear that never really leaves. Her reflection stared back, silhouette of everything her mother had raised her to be, proud Nigerian woman with fire in her veins and dreams bigger than Lagos itself. But proud women don't survive when powerful men want them dead. The scissors made their first cut through her natural hair, thick coils falling into the sink like pieces of her former life. Each snip felt like a small death, mourning someone who would never exist again. Lydia, daughter, sister, the girl who used to laugh so easily, she was dying in this bathroom at 2 in the morning while Seoul slept outside her window, indifferent to her transformation. 3 months ago her brother Chitty had pressed a USB drive into her palm, his blood warm and sticky on her fingers, his last breath forming words she would never forget. "Run," he had gasped. "Don't stop running until you're someone they'd never recognize." The memory made her hands shake harder, but she kept cutting, kept destroying, kept becoming. Her family's murder played behind her eyes every time she blinked. The syndicate had been thorough, professional, the kind of evil that wore expensive suits and shook hands with senators. They had killed her brother for witnessing their arms deal, killed her mother for asking too many questions, and they would kill Lydia too if they ever found her. The USB drive sitting on her bathroom counter held enough evidence to destroy them, names and transactions and proof of deals that had gotten people killed, but evidence meant nothing without power to use it. Seoul had been Chitty's dying suggestion, a city far enough from their reach, a place with its own underworld that might offer protection if she could find a way in. But Seoul's criminal organizations didn't recruit desperate women with nothing but grief and a flash drive. They recruited soldiers, enforcers, people who could prove their worth with violence and loyalty. They recruited men. The binding cloth came next, wrapped so tight around her chest that breathing became a conscious effort. Lydia had practiced this for weeks, learned to tolerate the pressure, the constant reminder of what she was hiding. She studied her reflection as the cloth flattened her curves, erased the evidence of her femininity, transformed her body into something ambiguous enough to pass. Her face had always been androgynous, sharp jawline inherited from her father, high cheekbones that could read masculine in the right light. Without her hair, without the softness, she looked like someone else entirely. The voice came last, hours of practice lowering her register, finding the resonance in her chest, speaking from a deeper place until it sounded natural. "Lee," she told her reflection, her new voice strange in her own ears. "My name is Lee. Half Korean mother, Nigerian father, both dead. Grew up in South Africa, been fighting my whole life." The lies rolled off her tongue smooth as truth, rehearsed until they felt like memory. By the time the sun rose over Seoul, Lydia Eze had disappeared completely. Only Lee remained, standing in that bathroom with determined eyes and a heart beating against ribs wrapped too tight, ready to become someone strong enough to survive. The underground fighting circuit operated in the basement of a club in Gangnam, all concrete and blood and money-changing hands in the shadows. Lee had found it through careful listening, days of haunting the right neighborhoods, asking the wrong questions until someone finally gave directions. The crowd tonight was thick, pressed against chain-link fence, watching 2 men destroy each other for entertainment and profit. Blood sprayed across the concrete. The crowd roared. Lee felt nothing but cold focus. She had signed up under her new name, paid the entry fee with money she couldn't afford to lose, and now she stood in a corner wrapping her hands with tape, waiting for her turn to prove she belonged in this world. Her opponent was twice her size, all muscle and scars and cruel confidence. He looked at Lee like she was an easy paycheck. That would be his first mistake. The fight was brutal and quick. Lee moved like her father had taught her, Krav Maga precision mixed with street fighting ruthlessness, targeting weak points with surgical efficiency. Her opponent was strong but slow, predictable, the kind of fighter who relied on size instead of skill. She let him think he was winning for the first minute, dodging, absorbing hits that would bruise but not break, learning his patterns. Then she struck, knee to his solar plexus, elbow to his temple when he bent forward, arm bar that dislocated his shoulder with a wet pop that made the crowd gasp. He went down hard. Lee didn't let go, maintained pressure until he tapped the concrete 3 times in surrender, until the referee pulled her off, until the crowd's shock turned into grudging approval. She stood over her opponent's gasping body, chest heaving with effort she couldn't quite hide, and for the first time since arriving in Seoul, she felt something close to hope. In the VIP section above the cage, Kang Jae-Won watched the fight with eyes that missed nothing. He was 29 years old and looked like money and danger in equal measure, expensive suit somehow pristine despite the blood-spattered atmosphere, dark eyes tracking Lee's movements with predator's focus. The young fighter intrigued him, something in the way they moved, controlled violence wrapped in discipline most street fighters never learned. Min-jun stood beside him, second in command and closest thing Jae-Won had to a friend. "That one's interesting," Min-jun said, nodding toward Lee who was collecting winnings from the coordinator. "Small but vicious. Could be useful." Jae-Won's organization, the Baekho Clan, controlled significant portions of Seoul's underground, gambling and imports and information brokerage, built on foundation of loyalty and fear in equal measure. He had inherited a struggling operation at 25 after his uncle's assassination and transformed it into something powerful enough that even the Yakuza thought twice before encroaching on his territory. But power required constant maintenance, new blood, soldiers who could prove themselves worthy of the family he'd built. "Find out who he is," Jae-Won said, eyes still on Lee. "If he's clean, make an offer." 3 days later, Lee stood in the lobby of what appeared to be a corporate office building in Gangnam, all glass and steel and legitimate veneer hiding something much darker underneath. Min-jun had approached her after the fight, casual conversation that turned into job offer, and now she was being escorted to the top floor where the Baekho Clan's real business happened. The elevator opened directly into Jae-Won's office, space that spoke of wealth earned through methods that never saw daylight. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's glittering skyline, city spread out below like a kingdom. Jae-Won sat behind a minimalist desk, studying a tablet, and didn't look up when Lee entered. The power move was obvious, establishing hierarchy before words were even exchanged, but Lee had expected nothing less. "You fight well," Jae-Won said finally, setting the tablet aside and fixing Lee with gaze that felt like being dissected. Voice smooth, accent educated, nothing like the thugs who worked the fighting circuits. "Small though. Fast won't save you from a bullet." "Why should I trust you?" Lee kept her voice level, resonance low in her chest where she'd practiced. "You shouldn't. But I'm good at what I do and I don't ask questions. In your world, that's worth something." The corner of Jae-Won's mouth almost smiled. He stood, moved around the desk with dangerous grace, circling Lee like a shark deciding whether prey was worth the effort. Up close, he was taller than he'd seemed, presence that filled space and demanded attention. Lee forced herself to meet his eyes, not challenge exactly but not submission either, the careful balance of respect and confidence. 15 million won a month, Jae-Won said. Room and board at the compound. Complete loyalty, absolute discretion. You work for me, you die for me. You betray me, he paused, let the unfinished threat hang between them like blade, and I make sure you beg for death long before it comes. Lee extended her hand, grip firm, meeting his gaze. Understood. Jae-Won's hand was warm, strong, swallowed Lee's smaller one completely. The contact sent electricity up Lydia's arm that she absolutely could not acknowledge, could not react to, could not let show on her face. This was survival, nothing more. The fact that Kang Jae-Won was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are, all sharp edges and cold control, meant absolutely nothing. It couldn't mean anything. She was Lee, and Lee needed this job to stay alive. "Welcome to the family," Jae-Won said, and the word family hit Lydia somewhere deep in her chest where grief still lived, sharp and sudden enough that she almost broke character right there in his office. If you're enjoying Lydia's journey of survival and transformation, subscribe to Afro K Chronicles for more stories of love, danger, and finding yourself in the most unexpected places. The Baekho compound occupied an entire floor of the building plus living quarters below, fortress disguised as business headquarters. Lee's new home was a shared dormitory room with bunk beds and lockers, functional and sparse, housing for soldiers, not family. Her roommate was Do-hyun, 23 years old, with easy smile and innocent eyes that seemed wildly out of place in an organization built on violence. He welcomed Lee like a long-lost brother, talking non-stop about clan politics and training schedules, and which enforcers to avoid, friendly in the way puppies are friendly, without guile or suspicion. That first night Lee lay in the top bunk, binding still wrapped tight around her ribs, listening to Do-hyun's soft snoring below, and realized the full magnitude of what she'd done. She was living with 20 men, would eat with them, train with them, shower in the same facilities, maintain this lie 24 hours a day without break. One mistake, one moment of letting her guard down, and everything would end. Probably violently. The routine started at 5 in the morning, physical training that pushed every member of the clan to their limits and beyond. Lee kept up, refused to show weakness, let the pain become white noise she could ignore. Her father's training had prepared her for this, years of discipline beaten into muscle memory, but maintaining the masculine performance while exhausted required constant vigilance. The way men moved, took up space, interacted with casual violence, she had to mirror it perfectly. Showers were the worst, communal space with no privacy, steam, and naked bodies, and constant risk of discovery. Lee claimed a skin condition, something contagious enough that the others gave her space, and took her showers at 3 in the morning when the dormitory slept. Cold water to stay alert, quick efficiency, always listening for footsteps, the binding never removed completely even then, just loosened enough to breathe. Do-hyun asked questions sometimes, innocent curiosity about Lee's past, why he never joined them drinking, whether he'd ever had a girlfriend. Lee deflected with carefully constructed lies, stories about growing up rough in South Africa, learning to fight before learning to read, family dead from violence that made emotional connection impossible. The lies came easier each time, felt more real, until sometimes Lydia forgot where Lee ended and truth began. 2 months into her employment, the routine mission went catastrophically wrong. Simple job: intercept a rival gang's shipment, send a message about territorial boundaries, should have been quick and clean. Instead, they walked into an ambush, bullets turning the warehouse into kill box, enforcers dropping around her with wet sounds that would haunt her later. Lee saw Min-jun pinned behind a container, saw the shooter lining up the kill shot, moved without thinking. The bullet meant for Min-jun's head took Lee in the shoulder instead, burning path through flesh that felt like being branded. She went down hard, but kept moving, returned fire until the shooter dropped, dragged Min-jun to cover while blood soaked her shirt warm and sticky. The pain was transcendent, overwhelming, but she couldn't scream, couldn't show weakness, just gritted her teeth and kept fighting until reinforcements arrived. Jae-Won personally treated her wound in his office afterward, hands surprisingly gentle as he cut away the blood-soaked shirt. Lee's heart hammered against her ribs, not from pain but from proximity, his fingers on her skin, the careful way he cleaned the graze, the binding visible beneath the torn fabric. She held her breath, certain he would notice, would see, would know, but he just worked with clinical efficiency, wrapping clean bandages over the binding without comment. "You're tougher than you look, Lee," he said quietly, and something in his voice made Lydia's chest tight in ways that had nothing to do with the binding. "Just doing my job," Lee managed, voice rough with suppressed pain. Jae-Won's eyes met hers, moment stretching longer than it should, something passing between them that neither acknowledged. "You saved Minjun's life. That means something in this family. Thank you." The gratitude in his voice, the genuine warmth, it destroyed something in Lydia's carefully maintained walls. She was falling, she realized with dawning horror. Falling for a man who would kill her if he knew what she was, falling while wearing a lie like armor, falling into something that could only end in devastation. After the warehouse incident, Jae-Won started keeping Lee close, promoted her to personal bodyguard, which meant constant proximity. Late nights in his office reviewing operations, strategy sessions that stretched past midnight, moments where it was just the two of them and Seoul spread out below like glittering possibility. He talked during those nights, shared pieces of himself he didn't show the others, about building the clan from nothing, about the weight of protecting people who depended on him, about power being less about fear and more about making people believe you'd die for them. Lee listened, offered thoughts carefully, felt the intimacy of those conversations like physical touch. Jae-Won trusted her, trusted Lee, confided in ways that made Lydia's guilt a living thing eating her from inside. She was lying to him every second, every breath, betraying trust he was offering freely, and the worst part was she couldn't stop. Stopping meant exposure, meant death, meant losing the only safety she'd found since her family's murder. For months in, Jae-Won got drunk on the anniversary of something he wouldn't name at first, just sitting in his office with expensive whiskey and haunted eyes. Lee had been about to leave, give him privacy for whatever grief he was drowning, but he'd asked her to stay, voice rough with alcohol and memory. So Lee sat, watched him pour another drink, waited. "Her name was Seo-Yun," Jae-Won said finally, staring at the Seoul skyline like it held answers. "3 years ago I was going to propose. Had the ring picked out, reservation at her favorite restaurant, whole future planned. She was beautiful, intelligent, made me believe I could have something beyond this life." He laughed, sound like breaking glass. "Turns out she was a spy, rival organization planted her in my life to gather intelligence. The night I was going to propose, she triggered an attack. 15 of my men died. My best friend died. All because I was stupid enough to love her." His hands clenched around the whiskey glass hard enough that Lydia worried it would shatter. "I killed her myself," he continued, voice flat now, emotional connection severed. Put a bullet in her head while she begged and explained that it was just business, nothing personal. "And I learned something that night, Lee. I learned that women are beautiful poison. Every single one. They'll smile and lie and destroy you from the inside out because that's what they're made for." The words hit Lydia like physical blows, each one landing where she was most vulnerable. She understood his trauma, understood why he'd built walls, but she also understood the impossibility of her situation with perfect clarity. He would never trust a woman again, never let one close, and here she was lying to him about the most fundamental aspect of her identity. When he found out, and some part of her knew he would eventually find out, it would confirm every terrible thing he believed. "I'm sorry," Lee said quietly, the only honest thing she could offer. Jae-Won looked at her then, eyes searching Lee's face for something. "You're a good friend," he said. "The little brother I never had. Promise me you'll never lie to me, Lee. Promise me that much is real." Lydia's heart shattered into pieces, small enough to slip through her ribs. "I promise," Lee lied, because what else could she say, and hated herself for it. Training sessions became torture after that night, not because of the physical demands, but because of proximity. Jae-Won had always been hands-on, adjusting stances, correcting form, casual touch that was normal among the clan members. But now every contact felt electric, charged with something Lydia couldn't name and couldn't want. When he pinned her during sparring, his body weight on hers, their faces inches apart, she had to fight reactions that had nothing to do with the fight itself. "You're distracted," he said during one session, holding her down, his breath warm on her face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Lee ground out, using all her strength to flip the position, reverse their places, pin him instead. "Just tired." Jae-Won laughed, actually laughed, sound rare and beautiful enough that it made Lydia's chest ache. "There you are," he said, and the approval in his voice was worse than any punishment. 6 months into living as Lee, Lydia barely remembered who she'd been before. The binding felt like a second skin, the deepened voice natural as breathing, the masculine performance so practiced it required no thought. She was Lee to everyone who knew her, Lee in the mirror, Lee in her own head most days. Lydia existed only in stolen moments at 3 in the morning when she could unwrap the binding and remember she'd been human once, been a woman, been someone's daughter and sister instead of this half-life built on lies. The USB drive sat in a hidden pocket in her jacket, always, evidence she still couldn't use because she had no power to wield it. The syndicate that killed her family operated internationally, had connections in governments and law enforcement, the kind of power that made evidence meaningless without equal force to back it up. She needed the Baekho Clan's resources, needed Jae-Won's reach, but asking meant revealing herself, meant destroying everything she'd built, meant confirming his worst beliefs about women and lies. So she stayed silent, stayed Lee, stayed in this impossible situation where she was falling in love with a man who confided in her as a brother, trusted her as a friend, and would probably kill her as a traitor. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. Don't forget to subscribe to Afro K Chronicles if you want to see how Lydia's dangerous deception unfolds, because things are about to get a lot more complicated. Min-Jun started watching Lee differently around month 5, eyes too knowing, attention too focused. He never said anything directly, just studied her when he thought she wasn't looking, noted small things, cataloged evidence of something he couldn't quite name. Lee felt his suspicion like pressure against her skin, waiting for the confrontation, the exposure, the end. It came on a quiet Tuesday, late afternoon when most of the clan was occupied elsewhere. Min-Jun found Lee alone in the training room, working through forms, and closed the door behind him with quiet finality that made Lydia's heart race. "I know," he said simply. Lee froze mid-movement, every muscle tense, calculating distances, exits, whether she could fight her way out if this went bad. "Know what?" Min-Jun moved closer, not threatening exactly but serious, voice low enough that no one passing would hear. "That you're hiding something. I don't know what exactly, and honestly I don't care to dig deeper. But the boss trusts you, which means I need to know you won't hurt him. He's been through enough." The relief was dizzying, made Lydia's knees weak. Min-Jun suspected but didn't know, hadn't figured it out completely, was offering something like trust or maybe warning. Lee forced her breathing steady, met his eyes. "I won't hurt him." "That's not why I'm here." "Good," Min-Jun said, and after a pause added, "Whatever you're running from, whatever you're hiding, just remember that secrets have weight. Eventually they crush you if you're not careful." He left Lee standing in the training room, alone with the truth of his words, the weight of her lies pressing down until breathing hurt worse than the binding ever had. That night Jae-Won asked Lee to accompany him to a high-stakes meeting with international arms dealers, dangerous negotiation that required sharp mind and sharper reflexes. Just the two of them and Min-Jun, small team for delicate work. Lee should have been honored, should have recognized the trust implicit in the invitation, but all she felt was dread coiling in her stomach like a snake. The meeting was in a private room of an expensive restaurant, all dark wood and dim lighting and men in suits who dealt death like business transactions. Lee stood behind Jae-Won's chair, silent and watchful, catalogued faces and exits and threat levels out of habit. The negotiation proceeded smoothly, prices discussed, shipment schedules agreed upon, everything professional and cold. Then Jae-Won took a drink from the glass of whiskey the dealer had poured, and Lee saw something in the dealer's eyes. Flash of satisfaction too quick to be innocent. She moved without thinking, knocked the glass from Jae-Won's hand before he could swallow, splashing expensive whiskey across expensive table. "What are you doing?" Jae-Won started, but Lee wasn't listening, was already reaching for her gun as the dealer's men reached for theirs, as the room exploded into violence. Gunfight in a closed space is chaos incarnate, bullets and bodies and blood turning civilized meeting into slaughterhouse in seconds. Lee moved on instinct, returned fire, dropped 2 shooters before they could target Jae-Won, grabbed his arm and dragged him toward the exit while Min-Jun provided covering fire. She felt the burn of a bullet graze her side. Another hit the wall where her head had been seconds before, kept moving because stopping meant death. Min-Jun took a hit in the shoulder, but kept fighting, kept moving, the 3 of them making it to the car through sheer momentum and violence. Lee drove, hands steady despite the adrenaline, despite Jae-Won's labored breathing beside her, despite the knowledge that something was very wrong with him beyond the immediate danger. "Safe house," Jae-Won gasped, and gave her an address in the mountains, hours from Seoul. Secret location he'd prepared for exactly this kind of emergency. By the time they reached the isolated cabin, Jae-Won was barely conscious, skin gray, breathing shallow, symptoms that had nothing to do with the gunfight. Lee's medical training was limited, but she knew poisoning when she saw it, recognized the signs from her mother's work in Lagos, understood with sinking certainty what the dealer had done. Min-Jun's shoulder needed treatment, but he waved her off. "Take care of him first," he said, pain making his voice tight. "I'll manage." The cabin had a medical kit, well stocked for emergencies, and Lee found the antidote vials in a locked case, instructions printed in neat Korean that made her hands shake as she read. "Inject near the heart. Maintain skin-to-skin contact for 6 to 8 hours to monitor vitals. Constant vigilance to ensure heart rate doesn't crash." She understood what that meant, what it required, felt the full weight of the impossible choice settling on her shoulders. To save his life, she would have to remove his shirt, remove her own shirt, expose the binding, expose everything. Jae-Won was unconscious, dying, wouldn't know what she was, but afterward, when he woke up, when he found her pressed against his chest, when he saw the truth. Lee looked at Min-Jun, who was watching her with knowing eyes. "Go," he said quietly. "I'll keep watch. Save him." Lydia cut away Jae-Won's shirt with shaking hands, found the injection site over his heart, administered the antidote with precision her father would have been proud of. Then she removed her own shirt, unwrapped the binding that had been her armor for 6 months, let her body breathe freely for the first time in forever. The binding fell away and she was Lydia again, curves undeniable, femininity impossible to hide, standing in a cabin in the mountains with her entire lie exposed. She positioned herself carefully against Jae-Won's side, skin-to-skin contact necessary to monitor his heartbeat, her breasts pressed against his ribs, her ear over his heart counting beats, her hand on his pulse checking rhythm every 15 minutes. Hours passed in that intimate configuration, Lydia whispering confessions he couldn't hear, truth pouring out in the darkness. "My name is Lydia Eze," she told his unconscious form. "I'm not Korean. I'm not a man. I'm a liar who is too afraid to be herself. You said you'd never trust a woman again, and you were right not to. Look at me. I've been lying to you every single day. But I love you," she whispered, and the words felt like absolution and damnation together. "God help me, I love you, and I hate myself for it, because you deserve better than another beautiful lie." His fever broke around 4 in the morning, heartbeat stabilizing, breathing evening out, crisis passing. Lydia was exhausted, emotionally hollowed out, and she let herself fall asleep against his chest, just for a moment, just to rest. She woke to cold steel against her throat. Jae-Won was conscious, eyes open, looking down at her with expression that would haunt Lydia for the rest of her life. Betrayal and confusion and dawning horror as his hand, the one not holding the knife, touched her bare shoulder, traced the curve of her waist, confirmed what his eyes were telling him. "Who are you?" he asked, voice like broken glass. Lydia met his gaze. No point in lying now. Voice her own natural register for the first time in 6 months. "My name is Lydia. You're a woman." "Yes." "You've been a woman this entire time." "Yes." The knife pressed harder, drew a thin line of blood, but his hand was shaking with the effort of not killing her immediately. "Why?" he demanded. "Why do this to me?" "Because I was dying," Lydia said, and the truth felt like relief and devastation. "My family was murdered by a syndicate with international reach. I fled to Seoul with nothing, needed protection and power. The only way into your world was to become someone else. The only way you'd accept me was as a man." "You could have told me," Jae-Won said, voice breaking. "After you were in, after I trusted you, you could have told me." "Could I?" Lydia challenged, fear making her bold. "You told me yourself you'd never let a woman near your organization. What would you have done if a desperate Nigerian woman showed up begging for help?" Silence, because they both knew the answer. "I trusted you," Jae-Won said, and the pain in his voice was worse than any blade. "I told you things I've never told anyone. I let you into my life. I thought you were my brother, my friend, and it was all a lie." "Not all of it," Lydia tried, but he cut her off. "All of it," he insisted. "Every conversation, every moment, built on deception. You're just like her, just like Seo-Yun, another beautiful woman destroying me from the inside out." "I'm not," Lydia said desperately. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to survive." "By using me," he spat. "By lying to my face every single day for 6 months." He looked at her then, really looked, saw the woman beneath the disguise, and something shifted in his expression, something that made Lydia's breath catch. "I knew," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Some part of me knew, the way I felt around you. I told myself it was impossible, but I knew." The admission hung between them, dangerous and electric, awareness crackling in the space where trust used to be. Hit subscribe on Afro K Chronicles, because what happens next will change everything between them, and you won't want to miss a single moment. "We're stuck here for 48 hours, Jae-Won said finally, lowering the knife, but not his guard. "The poison needs time to clear my system completely. Min-Jun won't check the location until then, so you and I are going to have a very long conversation about truth and consequences." He handed her his shirt, couldn't quite look at her. "Cover yourself," he said roughly. "I can't think when you're, just cover yourself." Lydia pulled on his shirt, fabric enormous on her smaller frame, falling to mid-thigh, somehow more revealing than bare skin had been. The confession that he was affected, that he couldn't think clearly seeing her as a woman, it shifted something between them that neither was ready to name. The next 48 hours would determine everything, whether love could survive betrayal, whether truth could heal what lies had broken, whether two people who'd been destroying each other could find a way to build something real from the ruins. But that was a story for the moments to come, for the reckoning that awaited them both in that isolated cabin where all masks had finally fallen away. The shirt hung loose on Lydia's frame, collar slipping off one shoulder, and she watched Jae-Won force his eyes away from the exposed skin like it burned him to look. The knife lay on the table between them now, no longer an immediate threat, but still a promise of violence hanging in the air thick enough to taste. Min-Jun had disappeared into the other room, giving them privacy for a reckoning that had been building for 6 months, every lie Lydia had told, every moment of trust Jae-Won had given. All of it converging in this cabin in the mountains where pretense had finally shattered. "Tell me everything," Jae-Won said, his voice stripped of the warmth she'd grown accustomed to over months of late-night conversations. "Start from the beginning, and don't you dare lie to me again." So Lydia told him, words tumbling out like confession, like purging poison from a wound. She told him about Lagos, about her brother Chidi's work exposing corruption, about the night he'd stumbled home with a USB drive and bullet holes, blood on his hands as he pressed the evidence into her palm. She told him about hiding under the bed while men with guns searched their house, about her mother's screams cutting off too suddenly, about 3 days of running before she made it to the airport with fake documents and her last 200,000 naira converted to won. I came to Seoul because Chitty told me to, Lydia said, her natural voice strange in her own ears after months of forcing it deeper. He said the syndicate had Korean connections, that Seoul had an underground powerful enough to protect me if I could find a way in. I had evidence that could destroy them, but no power to use it, no way to make them pay for what they took from me. So you used me, Jae-Won said flatly. Infiltrated my organization, lied to my face, made me trust you, all so you could what? Get revenge? I needed protection, Lydia shot back, fear making her sharp. I needed resources, I needed power, and your world doesn't let women through the front door. You said it yourself that night you got drunk, you'll never let a woman close to your organization again. What was I supposed to do? Walk up and ask nicely while assassins hunted me across 3 continents? The truth of it hung between them, uncomfortable and irrefutable. Jae-Won's jaw worked, muscles tight with rage he was barely containing, but he didn't argue because they both knew she was right. A desperate woman with nothing but a story would have been turned away at best, killed as a security risk at worst. You should have trusted me, he said, but the words lacked conviction. Like you trusted Seo-yeon, Lydia asked, and regretted it immediately when his expression went cold enough to freeze blood. Don't, he warned, voice dropping to something dangerous. Don't you dare compare yourself to her like you're somehow better. You did exactly what she did, wore a mask, played a role, lied with every breath. Lydia stood, anger overriding self-preservation, moved closer despite the threat radiating off him in waves. I am nothing like her. She wanted to destroy you for profit. I wanted to survive long enough to get justice for my family. She betrayed you after you loved her. I've been protecting you since the day I walked into your organization. I took a bullet for Minjun. I saved your life tonight. I've bled for the Baekho Clan while lying about who I was because being myself meant being dead. Then why not tell me after? Jae-Won demanded, standing too, and suddenly they were too close. His height advantage pronounced now that she wasn't wearing boots with lifted heels. After you proved yourself, after I made you my bodyguard, after I told you about Seo-yeon, you had dozens of chances to tell me the truth. And what would you have done? Lydia challenged, tipping her head back to maintain eye contact, close enough now that she could feel heat radiating off his skin. Would you have understood? Would you have helped me? Or would you have put a bullet in my head for being another lying woman who got too close? Silence, heavy and suffocating, because Jae-Won didn't have an answer that wouldn't prove her point. I don't know, he admitted finally, and the honesty of it cracked something in Lydia's chest. I don't know what I would have done, and that's the problem. You never gave me the chance to choose. You made the decision for me, decided I couldn't handle the truth. Because you couldn't, Lydia said quietly. You're barely handling it now, and I saved your life. Imagine if I'd told you months ago, if I'd walked into your office as Lydia instead of Lee, you would have seen Seo-yeon's ghost instead of me. You would have killed me or thrown me out, and I would have died in some alley while the syndicate celebrated. Jae-Won's hand came up, almost touched her face, stopped inches away like he'd remembered himself. His fingers trembled in the space between them, wanting and restraint at war in his expression. I hate that you're right, he said, voice rough. I hate that I understand why you did it. I hate that some part of me knew the whole time and chose not to see it. What do you mean you knew? Lydia asked, and her own voice had gone soft, dangerous territory they were entering now. His hand dropped, but he didn't step back, didn't create distance even though they both needed it desperately. The way you moved, he said, eyes tracking her face like he was memorizing new details. How careful you were about touch. The way you flinched when Do-hyun asked about girlfriends, little things that didn't add up. And the way I felt around you, like static electricity, like something pulling me toward you that I kept telling myself was impossible. What did you tell yourself it was? Lydia asked, heart hammering against ribs that could finally expand fully without binding crushing them. Brotherhood, Jae-Won said. Trust. the kind of bond soldiers build. Anything except the truth. And what was the truth? That I was attracted to you, he admitted, and the words fell between them like bombs. That every time we sparred and I pinned you down, I wanted to keep you there. That late nights in my office felt like more than strategy sessions. That I was falling for someone I thought was my brother, and it was destroying me because it made no sense. Lydia's breath caught, world tilting sideways with the weight of his confession. You were attracted to me as Lee? I was attracted to you as yourself, Jae-Won corrected. My body knew what my mind refused to accept, that you were a woman, that the person I was falling for wasn't who I thought they were. And now you're standing here in my shirt looking at me like that, and I still want to kill you for lying, but I also want to. He stopped, jaw clenching, wouldn't finish the sentence. Wanna what? Lydia pressed, reckless now, too far gone to care about consequences. This, Jae-Won said, and closed the last few inches between them. His hand cupped her face, touch gentle despite the anger still radiating off him, thumb brushing her cheekbone with reverence that contradicted every harsh word he'd spoken. Lydia's eyes fluttered closed, certain he was going to kiss her, wanting it despite everything, despite the knife on the table and the lies between them and the impossibility of any future together. But he didn't kiss her, just held her face in his hand, forehead dropping to rest against hers, breathing ragged like he'd run a marathon. I can't, he whispered. I can't do this, I can't trust you, I can't want you this much when everything between us was a lie. Not everything, Lydia said, her own hands coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself. The loyalty was real, the respect was real, the way I felt about you was real even when everything else was performance. How do I know that? Jae-Won asked, anguish breaking through his control. How do I ever know what's real with you when you're this good at lying? Lydia opened her eyes, found him watching her from inches away, close enough to count his eyelashes, close enough to feel his breath on her lips. You don't, she said honestly. You'll never know for certain, you'll always wonder, and I hate that I did that to you, but I'd do it again if it meant staying alive. He pulled back then, put distance between them that felt like miles, ran both hands through his hair in frustration. Get some sleep, he said, voice back to controlled neutrality. We have 46 more hours stuck here, and I need to think. Where will you sleep? Lydia asked, looking around the small cabin with its single bedroom. The couch, Jae-Won said. You take the bed. We could share, Lydia offered before thinking better of it. The bed's big enough, and it's not like we haven't already. His eyes went dark, dangerous. That was different, you were unconscious, and I didn't know you were lying to me. Now I know, and I'm barely controlling the urge to either strangle you or… He stopped again, that unfinished sentence hanging between them like live wire. Or what? Lydia asked, because apparently she had no self-preservation instincts left. Jae-Won's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Go to bed, Lydia, before I do something we'll both regret. She went, closed the bedroom door between them, collapsed on the bed that smelled like him, and tried not to think about the fact that she'd just confessed her feelings to a man who wanted to kill her and kiss her in equal measure. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion won, dragged her under into dreams where she was still Lee and Jae-Won still trusted her, and everything was simple instead of shattered. Morning came too bright through windows that didn't have curtains, sunlight cutting across Lydia's face until she woke disoriented and aching. Someone had covered her with a blanket during the night, tucked it around her shoulders with care that made her chest tight when she realized Jae-Won must have done it, must have come in while she slept and shown tenderness despite his anger. The main room was empty when she emerged, Minjun nowhere to be seen, Jae-Won outside on the small porch staring at mountains that surrounded them in isolation. Lydia made coffee from supplies in the cabin, brought him a cup as peace offering, sat beside him without asking permission. They drank in silence for long minutes, watching mist burn off the peaks as sun climbed higher, the kind of quiet that could be comfortable or suffocating depending on what filled it. Jae-Won's shoulder brushed hers, contact that could have been accident or intention, and Lydia didn't pull away. Tell me about her, Lydia said finally. The real story, not the version you told Lee. Jae-Won's coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth, something shifting in his expression. Why? Because I want to understand, Lydia said. I want to know what I'm walking into, what ghost I'm competing with. You're not competing with anything, Jae-Won said, but he started talking anyway. Her name was Min Seo-yeon. She was a lawyer. We met at a charity function I was using to launder money. She was beautiful, intelligent, made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years. I fell hard and fast, thought I'd found someone who could see past what I did for a living, someone who loved me anyway. What parts of your question do you think audiences are most curious about right now? Whether Jae-Won can ever truly forgive Lydia's deception, what happened to Min-jun, or how Lydia plans to take down the syndicate that murdered her family. He took a long drink of coffee, eyes distant with memory. 6 months we were together, 6 months where I told her everything, showed her every vulnerability, planned a future I'd never let myself want before. The night I was going to propose, I came home early, found her in my office downloading files from my computer, and she looked at me like I was an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Said it was just a job, nothing personal, that I should have known better than to trust anyone in this life. What did you do? Lydia asked, though she already knew the answer. I called my men, locked down the compound, but she'd already triggered the attack, Jae-Won said. Rival organization hit us from 3 sides, coordinated assault using intel she'd provided. 15 men died, including my best friend who'd been with me since we were teenagers. I found Seo-yeon trying to escape through the tunnels, and she begged, tried to explain that she had no choice, that her family was being threatened, that she'd started to have real feelings for me. Did you believe her? Lydia asked carefully. I wanted to, Jae-Won admitted. Even after everything, part of me wanted her excuses to be true, wanted to believe something between us had been real. But I couldn't risk it, couldn't let emotion override survival, so I put a bullet in her head and told myself I'd never make that mistake again. The parallel to their current situation was obvious, uncomfortable, the reason his anger at Lydia ran so deep. She'd done the same thing Seo-yeon had, infiltrated his organization under false pretenses, lied about fundamental aspects of herself, made him trust her, made him care. And now he had to decide whether to believe her motivations were different or whether he was being played again. I'm not her, Lydia said, knowing it wasn't enough, but needing to say it anyway. Prove it, Jae-Won challenged. We have 44 more hours. Convince me you're telling the truth, that any of this was real. How? Lydia asked, spreading her hands in helpless frustration. What proof could I possibly give you that you'd believe? I don't know, Jae-Won said. But you better figure it out before we get back to Seoul, because when we walk through those doors I have to decide what happens to you, and right now I'm leaning toward exile at best. Exile meant death, Lydia knew. The syndicate would find her within a week without the clan's protection, would finish what they'd started in Lagos, and all of this, the disguise, the lies, the falling in love, it would have been for nothing. She needed to convince him, needed to prove her loyalty was real even if everything else had been performance. The USB drive, Lydia said suddenly, reached into the pocket of her jacket that she'd grabbed from the bedroom, pulled out the small device that had started everything. This is what I've been protecting, what my brother died giving me, proof of the syndicate's operations. Names, transactions, evidence of arms deals that violated international law, killed innocent people, connected to politicians and military officials across 3 continents. Jae-Won took it carefully, turned it over in his fingers. You've had this the whole time? 6 months, Lydia confirmed. I was going to ask for your help eventually, once I'd proven myself valuable enough that you might actually listen, but I never got the chance before everything fell apart. What's stopping me from taking this, and using the information myself? Jae-Won asked, not threatening exactly but testing. If this is as valuable as you say, it could be worth millions in blackmail, political leverage, business opportunities. Nothing's stopping you, Lydia said. That's the proof you asked for. I'm giving you the only thing I have left, the only leverage I could use against you, and trusting that you'll help me instead of using me. Jae-Won stared at the USB drive like it might bite him, conflict clear in every line of his body. This doesn't erase the lying, he said finally. I know, Lydia agreed. Nothing can erase it. I can only tell you why and hope you understand even if you can't forgive. They sat in silence again, heavier now, weighted with everything unsaid. Lydia watched mountains and tried not to think about what came next, how she would survive if he chose exile, whether 6 months of pretending to be someone else had been worth it for these few moments of honesty. Why? Jae-Won asked abruptly. Why fall for me? Why let it get complicated? You could have kept it professional, could have stayed detached. Lydia laughed, sound bitter and broken. You think I wanted this? You think I planned to fall in love with the one man who could never forgive me for being a woman who lies? Trust me, I tried to stop it, tried to remind myself every day that you were a means to an end, that Lee was a role and nothing more. When did it change? Jae-Won pressed, and he'd shifted to face her fully now, attention focused like he was interrogating a suspect. The night you told me about your parents, Lydia said, remembering. 3 months in, we were in your office going over supply routes, and you mentioned offhand that your parents were killed when you were 10, that you watched it happen, that you built this empire on their graves as revenge and protection both. The way you said it, matter of fact, like it didn't still hurt, I recognized that particular kind of grief. The kind where you bury it so deep you almost forget it's there until something reminds you. That's when you fell for me, Jae-Won asked skeptically. A sad story about dead parents? No, Lydia said. That's when I realized you were more than what you pretended to be, that under the cold crime lord persona, you were just someone who'd been hurt and decided never to be vulnerable again. I recognized it because I was doing the same thing, hiding myself so deeply I almost forgot who I was. We were mirrors, and I started falling without even realizing it was happening. Jae-Won's expression did something complicated, softened and hardened simultaneously. I felt it too, he admitted quietly. That night, the way you looked at me, I thought Lee understood in ways most people couldn't. Thought I'd found a brother who knew what it meant to build yourself from ashes. You did, Lydia insisted. Lee was me, the parts of me that survived Lagos, that fought and protected and refused to break. I didn't invent a person. I just showed you the pieces I thought you'd accept. But you hid the rest, Jae-Won said. The softness, the femininity, the parts you thought made you weak. Because in your world they would have, Lydia shot back. You said it yourself. Women are beautiful poison. You'd never let one close to your organization. I showed you the warrior and hid the woman because that was the only way to survive. And now, Jae-Won asked, hand coming up again, that same almost touch hovering near her face. Now that I know, now that you're sitting here wearing my shirt looking at me like that, what are you? Both, Lydia said, leaning into his hand, making the contact he wouldn't quite commit to. I'm the fighter who saved Minjun and the woman who loves you. I'm Lee and Lydia and everything in between, and I'm terrified you can't accept all of it. His thumb brushed her jaw, touch so gentle it made her eyes sting with tears she refused to shed. I'm terrified I want to, he confessed. I'm terrified that, even knowing you lied, I still want you, still trust you in ways I shouldn't, still imagine a future where this doesn't end in blood and betrayal. Then don't let it, Lydia said, covering his hand with hers, keeping him close. Choose differently this time. Choose to believe me. Choose to let someone in even when it's terrifying. Jae-Won's forehead dropped to hers again, that intimate gesture that stopped just short of a kiss, breathing synchronized like they were sharing air. I need time, he said. 42 more hours before we have to face Seoul, before I have to decide what happens next. Can you give me that? Yes, Lydia whispered, because what choice did she have? Because she'd give him anything if it meant a chance at survival, at redemption, at something more than exile and death. They stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, hands intertwined, close enough to kiss, but not quite closing the distance, tension and want and fear creating a knot between them that neither knew how to untangle. Minjun cleared his throat from the doorway, startling them apart, professional masks sliding over both their faces like they hadn't just been breathing each other's air. "Sorry to interrupt," Minjun said, looking not sorry at all. "But we should talk about what happens when we get back. The clan will want answers." "The clan thinks Lee died saving me," Jae-Won said, standing, distance between him and Lydia suddenly vast. "We'll tell them the truth, that Lee was a woman named Lydia who infiltrated us under false pretenses, and I'll decide her fate after hearing what they have to say." "You're putting it to a vote?" Lydia asked, stomach sinking. "I'm letting them voice opinions," Jae-Won corrected. "Final decision is mine, but they deserve to know they were lied to, deserve a chance to react." "They'll want me dead," Lydia said flatly. "Probably," Jae-Won agreed, and his eyes when he looked at her were unreadable. "Which is why you need to spend the next 40 hours convincing me you're worth protecting." The remaining time in the cabin passed in strange rhythm, moments of tentative connection followed by long silences, conversations that started honest and ended in frustration, Jae-Won's anger and attraction at war with each other constantly. He asked questions about Lagos, about her family, about the evidence on the USB drive, and Lydia answered everything truthfully. No more lies, no more omissions, just raw honesty that left her feeling stripped bare. Night came again, and this time when Jae-Won said he'd take the couch, Lydia didn't argue, understood he needed space to process, to decide, to figure out if forgiveness was even possible. She lay awake in the bedroom listening to him move around outside, heard him on the phone with someone speaking low-urgent Korean, wondered if he was arranging her execution or her protection. Morning of the second day brought tension thick enough to choke on, both of them aware that time was running out, that soon they'd have to return to Seoul and face consequences neither could fully predict. Jae-Won was distant over breakfast, barely spoke, and Lydia felt hope slipping away with each hour of silence. "Do you think love can survive betrayal?" Lydia asked as they packed up the cabin, preparing for departure. "Or is trust something that once broken stays shattered forever?" Jae-Won paused, considered the question seriously. "I think it depends on why the betrayal happened," he said finally. "Seo-yeon betrayed me for money, for ambition, because she valued those things more than whatever we had together. You betrayed me for survival, which is different, but it still broke something between us." "Can it be fixed?" Lydia pressed. "I don't know," Jae-Won admitted. "Ask me again after we survive what comes next." The drive back to Seoul was quiet, Minjun at the wheel, Jae-Won in the passenger seat, Lydia in the back trying not to think about the fact that this might be her last day alive. The city appeared on the horizon, sprawling and indifferent, same skyline she'd first seen 6 months ago when she'd arrived desperate and alone. Everything had changed and nothing had changed. She was still desperate, still alone in the ways that mattered, still fighting for survival against impossible odds. The Baekho compound loomed ahead, fortress that had been home and prison both, and Lydia's hands shook as they pulled into the garage. Word had clearly spread, enforcers lined up in the main hall, Do-hyun at the front looking devastated, others angry, betrayed, ready for violence. Jae-Won had called ahead, told them Lee was alive but not Lee, that explanations would be given and judgment passed. Lydia walked into that hall as herself for the first time, no binding, no deepened voice, just a woman in borrowed clothes facing 20 men she'd lived with, fought beside, lied to for half a year. The silence was deafening, shock and rage rolling off them in waves that made her want to run, but she held her ground, met their eyes, accepted whatever came next. Do-hyun spoke first, voice cracking with hurt. "You were my brother," he said. "My best friend, I trusted you, told you things I never told anyone, and you were lying the whole time?" "I never lied about caring about you," Lydia said, looking directly at him. "Everything I felt, every conversation we had, that was real, Do-hyun. I just couldn't tell you who I really was." "Because you knew we'd never accept a woman," another enforcer spat. "You knew you didn't belong here, so you tricked us, put us all at risk." "I saved your lives," Lydia shot back, anger overriding fear. I took bullets for this clan, bled for you, fought beside you, and the only thing I lied about was what was between my legs. Does that really erase everything else? Yes, someone shouted, and others echoed the sentiment, calls for her death, for exile, for punishment that fit the crime of deception. Enough, Jae-won's voice cut through the chaos, command absolute. She lied about her identity, yes, but she never lied about her loyalty, never sold us out, never put us in danger. If anything, she's proven herself more dedicated than some who were born into this life. She's a woman, the same enforcer argued. You said yourself after Seo-yeon that women couldn't be trusted, that they were poison. I was wrong, Jae-won said, and the admission rippled through the hall like earthquake. I let one woman's betrayal color my judgment, made a rule based on fear instead of logic, and missed the fact that strength has nothing to do with gender. Lydia, or Lee, or whatever name she uses, she's earned her place here through action, and I won't throw that away because she wears a different body than I assumed. The declaration should have ended it, but Minjun stepped forward, addressed the room. I've known for weeks that something was different about Lee, he said. Suspected the truth, but said nothing because actions matter more than secrets. She saved my life in that warehouse, took a bullet meant for me without hesitation. That kind of loyalty is rare, and I think we'd be fools to kill her for being smart enough to survive in a system designed to exclude her. Do-hyun was crying now, openly, torn between betrayal and the genuine affection he'd had for his friend. I don't know what to think, he said. I don't know if I can forgive this. Lydia crossed to him, risky move that made several enforcers reach for weapons, but she ignored them, focused only on the young man who'd been first to welcome Lee into the fold. I'm sorry I lied to you, she said quietly. I'm sorry I couldn't trust you with the truth, that I let you believe in someone who didn't fully exist. But the parts that mattered were real, the friendship was real, and if you can't forgive me, I understand, but please know I never wanted to hurt you. Do-hyun looked at her, really looked, seeing the woman instead of the brother he'd thought he knew. You're still the same person, he said finally, like the realization was just hitting him. Everything I liked about Lee, the loyalty, the humor, the way you always had my back, that was you? That was me, Lydia confirmed. Then you're still my sibling, Do-hyun said, and used the gender-neutral term, offered acceptance wrapped in acknowledgement. Just a sister instead of a brother. The declaration shifted something in the room, other enforcers reconsidering, anger cooling to grudging acceptance, the kind of loyalty the Baekho Clan was built on asserting itself over prejudice. Not everyone was convinced, some still muttered about deception and risk, but the immediate threat of violence receded, replaced by wary tolerance. She stays, Jae-won announced, making it official. Her past is forgiven, her place in this clan secured, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. No one spoke up, which Lydia took as reluctant agreement, the kind of acceptance built on fear and respect rather than genuine forgiveness. It would have to be enough. The meeting dispersed slowly, enforcers returning to duties, casting glances at Lydia like she was a puzzle they couldn't quite solve. Do-hyun hugged her briefly, whispered I'll miss Lee, but I'm glad to know you, and left her standing in the hall with only Jae-won remaining. What happens now? Lydia asked, exhaustion crashing over her in waves now that immediate danger had passed. Now, Jae-won said, and something in his expression had shifted, walls lowering just slightly, we figure out what comes next, how to use that USB drive, how to destroy the people who killed your family, how to build something real from the wreckage of all these lies. We, Lydia repeated, hope flaring bright enough to hurt. We, Jae-won confirmed. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, not ready to trust without reservation, but I'm willing to try, willing to see if what we had as Lee and Jae-won can translate into something honest between Lydia and myself. Why? Lydia asked, needing to understand. After everything, why give me another chance? Jae-won's hand came up, cupped her face the way he had in the cabin, touched gentle and certain simultaneously. Because despite every logical reason not to, despite my history and my fears and my very justified anger, "I'm in love with you," he said. "Both versions, the warrior and the woman, the lie and the truth. And I'd rather risk being hurt again than lose you to my own cowardice." Lydia's breath caught, tears she'd been holding finally spilling over, relief and joy and terror all mixed together. "I love you," she said, words she'd whispered to his unconscious form now given freely in full light. "I've loved you since that night you told me about your parents, loved you through every lie I told, loved you enough that it destroyed me every day." What are you hoping happens between Lydia and Jae-Won as they work together to take down the syndicate? And do you think their love can truly survive everything they've been through? Jae-Won wiped her tears with his thumb, pulled her close, and this time when he lowered his head he didn't stop, pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that tasted like forgiveness and new beginnings and promises neither was sure they could keep. It was soft, careful, the kind of first kiss that acknowledged everything broken between them while hoping for something better. Lydia's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on like he might disappear, pouring 6 months of longing into the contact, feeling him respond with equal intensity. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together in the gesture that had become theirs, intimacy without words in the space where Lee had died and Lydia had been reborn. "Show me the evidence," Jae-Won said against her lips. "Show me what we're fighting for and let's end this together." So Lydia did, plugged the USB drive into his computer, brought up files that detailed 3 years of illegal arms deals, money laundering, political corruption spanning Nigeria, South Korea, and Russia. Names of officials, transaction records, shipping manifests, communications that proved conspiracy to commit murder, all of it meticulously documented by her brother in the weeks before his death. "This is enough to bring down governments," Jae-Won said, scrolling through data with growing intensity. "Enough to start wars or prevent them depending on who gets access." "I just want the people who killed my family held accountable," Lydia said. "I don't care about the rest. Don't care about political implications. I just want justice." "Then we'll get you justice," Jae-Won promised, and the determination in his voice made Lydia believe it might actually be possible. "We'll use my connections, leak this to the right people, make sure your brother's death meant something." Over the next 3 weeks they worked together, Lydia and Jae-Won side by side building a case against the syndicate, reaching out to international law enforcement, journalists who could be trusted, officials who weren't already compromised. The evidence was damning, impossible to ignore once it went public, and watching it unfold felt like watching justice in slow motion. The syndicate responded exactly as expected, sent assassins to eliminate the leak before more damage could be done, traced the information back to Seoul, back to the Baekho Clan, back to Lydia. The attack came on a Tuesday night, coordinated assault on the compound that made the warehouse ambush look like a training exercise, dozens of mercenaries with military-grade weapons attempting to erase the threat Lydia represented. But this time she wasn't alone, wasn't a desperate woman hiding behind a disguise. She was Lydia Eze fighting alongside the family she'd earned through blood and lies, the Baekho Clan standing with her against a common enemy. The battle was brutal, close-quarters combat in halls she'd learned as Lee, defending territory that had become home despite everything. Lydia fought like her father had taught her, like her brother would have wanted, like the warrior she'd always been underneath the masks and pretense. She took down 3 assassins trying to breach Jae-Won's office, protected Do-hyun when he got pinned by covering fire, moved through the chaos with deadly efficiency that reminded everyone why Lee had been so valuable. The lead mercenary cornered her in the training room, man twice her size with skills that matched her own, fight that pushed her to the absolute edge of her capabilities. They traded blows that would have killed lesser fighters, brutal exchange that left both bloodied, and when he finally got her on the ground with a knife to her throat she thought, this is it. This is how it ends. But Jae-Won came through the door like an avenging angel, put 2 bullets in the mercenary's head before he could finish the job, pulled Lydia from the floor with hands that shook. "Don't you dare die on me," he said, and she saw fear in his eyes, real terror that he might lose her after everything they'd survived. "Can't get rid of me that easy," Lydia managed, blood on her teeth from a split lip, ribs screaming from where she'd taken hits, alive and whole and victorious. The syndicate broke after that night, combination of public exposure and failed assassination attempt destroying their credibility, their power structure, their ability to operate. Arrests followed across 3 continents, politicians resigned, military officials faced courts-martial, the entire network her brother had documented collapsing under weight of its own corruption. Lydia watched it happen from Jae-Won's office, the same windows where she'd stood as Lee, and felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight since the night Chitty died. Justice wasn't the same as resurrection, wouldn't bring her family back, but it meant their deaths hadn't been meaningless, that the evidence had mattered, that she'd survived long enough to make it count. Jae-Won found her there at 3 in the morning, brought her tea the way she liked it, sat beside her in comfortable silence. "It's done," he said finally. "Your family's killers are facing consequences. The syndicate is destroyed. You're safe." "We're safe," Lydia corrected, reaching for his hand. "We did this together." He laced their fingers together, brought her hand to his lips in gesture that still made her breath catch. "I'm proud of you," he said. "For surviving, for fighting, for being brave enough to become someone else when that's what survival required." "Are you still angry?" Lydia asked, question she'd been afraid to voice. "About the lying, about Lee, about everything?" Jae-Won considered, answered honestly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "There are moments I remember a conversation we had and realize I'm not sure which version of you I was talking to, moments where I wonder what else might be a lie. But mostly I'm just grateful you survived, grateful you trusted me enough eventually to show me the truth, grateful I was smart enough not to kill you when I had the chance." Lydia laughed, sounds still rough from the fight earlier, leaned into his shoulder. "That's surprisingly romantic for a crime lord." "I'm a man of hidden depths," Jae-Won said, arm coming around her, holding her close. "You of all people should understand the value of layers." They sat like that watching Seoul wake up to a new day, city that had been hostile territory transformed into something like home, the Baekho Clan accepting Lydia not as Lee but as herself, the woman who'd been brave enough to lie and strong enough to tell the truth when it mattered most. 6 months later found Lydia training new recruits in the compound yard, teaching them the same techniques her father had taught her, the Baekho Clan's first official female enforcer setting precedent for others to follow. Jae-Won watched from his office window, smile playing at his lips as he observed the woman he loved being exactly who she was meant to be. No masks, no pretense, just Lydia in full sun. Minjun appeared beside him with reports that needed signing. "You're staring again," he commented, amused. "I'm allowed to stare at my girlfriend," Jae-Won replied, unrepentant. "Never thought I'd see the day," Minjun said. The great Kang Jae-Won domesticated by a woman who spent 6 months pretending to be a man. "She didn't domesticate me," Jae-Won corrected. "She challenged me, forced me to confront my prejudices, proved that strength has nothing to do with gender and everything to do with heart. I'm better for knowing her." "Both versions?" Minjun asked knowingly. "Both versions," Jae-Won confirmed. "Lee taught me to trust again, Lydia taught me to love, and I wouldn't trade either lesson for anything." That night in their shared quarters, Lydia curled against Jae-Won's side, tracing the scar on his chest from the poison that had started everything, the moment her disguise had fallen and truth had emerged. "I'm still sorry," she said quietly. "For lying, for the deception, for making you doubt everything." Jae-Won caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "I'm not," he said. "If you hadn't lied, I wouldn't have you, and I'd rather have every complicated, messy piece of you than anyone else's simple truth." "Even the parts that deceived you?" Lydia asked. "Especially those," Jae-Won said, pulling her closer. "Because those parts kept you alive long enough to find me, and I'm selfish enough to be grateful for whatever brought you into my life, even lies." Lydia shifted, looked up at him in the darkness. "You know what the strangest part is," she said. I spent 6 months trying to be someone you'd accept, became Lee because I thought that's what you needed, but I was always someone you could love. I just had to be brave enough to show you. You were always brave, Jae-Won corrected, fingers threading through her hair that was growing longer now, feminine in ways Lee's never could have been. Brave enough to survive, to fight, to love someone who by all rights should have killed you, to stand here now and trust me with your whole self. Do you? Lydia asked, old fear surfacing. Trust me with your whole self? Getting there, Jae-Won admitted honestly. Some days are easier than others, some moments I still wonder, but every day I choose to trust you is a day I prove Seo-yeon didn't win, didn't break me beyond repair. You're healing wounds I thought were permanent, and that's worth the risk. They came together in a kiss that started gentle and deepened into something more, promise and passion and the kind of intimacy that only comes from knowing someone completely, masks removed, truth laid bare. When they broke apart, both were breathless, tangled together in sheets that smelled like home. I love you, Lydia whispered against his skin. Both versions of myself love both versions of you, the cold crime lord and the man who covers me with blankets while I sleep. I love you too, Jae-Won replied, and the words came easier now, 6 months of practice making them natural. My warrior, my liar, my truth, my Lydia. Outside Seoul glittered indifferent and eternal, city that had witnessed their transformation from desperate strangers to something that looked remarkably like family, like love, like redemption earned through honesty after lies, through choosing trust after betrayal, through building something real from the wreckage of everything broken. Lydia had come to Seoul to hide, had disguised herself as a man to survive, had fallen in love with someone who by all rights should have been her enemy, and somehow despite everything had found the one place she could finally be completely herself, accepted for all the contradictions and complications that made her human. In the arms of the most dangerous man she'd ever met, she discovered that freedom looked nothing like she'd imagined, looked instead like this, like truth after lies, like love after loss, like home after endless running. And for the first time since her brother had pressed that USB drive into her bloody hands and told her to run, Lydia Eze stopped running, let herself rest, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd earned the right to stay.